Spa 2023 was probably the best F1 race we've had so far. Spa genuinely felt really exciting to watch, and even though Red Bull walked away with it, that's what we've come to expect from this season, and it doesn't take away from an excellent race. What's also interesting is that this was a sprint weekend. Recently, I made a video talking about how the sprint weekends kind of ruin the sport and make it so that the race is less unpredictable. And while I still think that can reign true, this sprint weekend did surprise me. The qualifying was very different to the qualifying of the race, having Piastri start on the front row as opposed to Leclerc. And it gave us a Piastri and Gasly podium, which of course means the race was interesting, as well as a bit of drama between Perez and Hamilton. So I will say, despite not being the biggest fan of the sprint races, and maybe being someone that would prefer a reverse grid, I do think that this weekend it worked quite well. And also, this weekend's sprint race didn't have any DRS, and was it just me that felt like the fighting was actually a lot better because people were battling around the corners, not just on the straights? And this made it so people actually had a chance to defend. I noticed the same thing in Austria when the DRS was disabled there. So for me, a relatively positive sprint race. And before the main Grand Prix event, I made some predictions on what I would like to see during the race. And let's just see how well I did. This is me pre-race, okay? This is the Sunday at 10:30 a.m. and the race starts at 2. Now, judging by what I've seen throughout qualifying, throughout sprint shootout and the sprint, I'm gonna say that Max Verstappen is easily winning this one. I would say he gets into the lead by maybe lap 8 or 9. I think Perez will get past Leclerc, and it will be a 1-2 finish for Red Bull. Leclerc should finish in third, but there may be a Ferrari disaster class on the strategy side. However, I do think Lando will get past Oscar, because on race pace, Lando just seems that little bit faster and a little bit better at managing tires. And maybe a bit of Alonso redemption. Let's see if my predictions were absolutely washed or if I was a little bit right. You know what? My predictions weren't too bad. I even just threw in the Fernando Alonso comeback because of his spin in the sprint. So I'm really surprised that I got that right. You can comment your predictions down below for Zandvoort for when we get back to racing after the break. So with those positives out the way, let's have a look at Oscar Piastri.
Piastri to the front of the field with a superb time. Oscar Piastri takes the lead with Max Verstappen on pit exit, and that gamble for intermediate tyres. Who of them? Checking the left-hand mirror is Oscar Piastri. Look at the momentum. Look at the speed that Max Verstappen's got, and he roars through to retake the lead. Piastri ducks in, who scores his best results in any Formula One race in the sprint. P2 for McLaren.
He was definitely the standout driver of this weekend. With an impressive qualifying, an impressive sprint shootout, and an impressive drive in the sprint race, only to then have an unfortunate incident with Carlos Sainz in turn 1 of the actual Grand Prix, where it all matters. But I think despite that, he's proven that he's definitely got a lot of potential as a rookie, and it's normal for rookies to make mistakes like this. Even without a title fight, there's still a lot going on in the midfield, with Aston Martin looking rubbish during qualifying, with both drivers making mistakes, but still managing to finish in the top 5 in the actual race, possibly giving them a bit more hope for the future. And as well, if you look further down the midfield, there's that intense teammate battle between Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo. In the sprint, Ricciardo really showed that he's still got what it takes. After a lap being deleted in qualifying, he just couldn't make it anywhere during the race. That's not to say he drove badly, it's just that he didn't have the opportunities, and Yuki did, and he made the most of them to finish in the points. And at the end of the day, it's the Grand Prix that matters. Alpine's weekend started out badly, but I genuinely think with the podium in the sprint and Ocon recovering from that bad qualifying to finish in the points, it was genuinely a strong showing from them. And it was another benefit of this charming race weekend at a great track where the format was actually enjoyable. Mercedes brought upgrades to Spa, and there was a lot of talk during and after FP1 that suggested they were going to do well here, with Charles Leclerc taking the only non-Red Bull spot on the podium and Hamilton just not being able to catch up. There was also a bit of a poor showing from George Russell, it felt like, who had moments during qualifying and sprint qualifying, and it felt like maybe the Mercedes could have been a bit further ahead than they actually were. And Spa really needed this after the controversies that have followed the track recently. Obviously, in the last 5 years, there have been 2 drivers in Formula Series dying at the track. And obviously, with the 2021 Spa race being ran completely under the safety car, a lot of people, including the FIA, had been hinting at Spa not staying on the calendar. This is definitely a step in the right direction for the track. And I must admit that Spa is my favourite of the season. Because of these past incidents, the FIA were very quick to delay the start of qualifying and the race if it was raining too much. And I can understand this, as the spray from the cars has been a real issue for a while now, but in the same vein, every time the track would be dried out to the level that intermediates would need to be used. And it got a lot of people questioning, well, what's the point of the extreme wet tires? If the track is going to be under safety car red flagged or delayed every single time we're in extreme wet conditions, there's not really much point having the tire there in the first place. And throughout its history, F1 has been a sport where you can race in the wet. And it definitely felt like former F1 driver and commentator Martin Brundle agreed with this statement, because whenever it was brought up, he seemed very defensive about the fact that they are racing drivers and the whole point is for them to race, even if the track is a bit wet. I do understand both sides though, as from a race organization point of view, you wouldn't want any controversial incidents to happen during this weekend. This may be the reason too why Hamilton got such a controversial penalty during the sprint race. I've heard both arguments for why he should and shouldn't have got a penalty. The arguments why not is that throughout F1, we've seen much more aggressive racing than that before, and penalties have not been issued out. Whereas the common theme through this season seems to be that penalties are being given out more often, and the rules are getting more strict and tight. This is fine, but you don't want to draw inconsistencies. I do think Hamilton pushed it a bit too hard, and the damage was to an extent his fault. He was never in front of Sergio Perez, and he went for a gap. But if you're not going for gaps when you're racing, what is the point of racing? There was no DRS activated at the time, and someone has to make the risky move somewhere. Personally, I can appreciate drivers being a bit more aggressive during the race. Another argument for the penalty though is that it was terminal damage for Perez, and he ended up having to retire. And if you are taking another car out, no matter how minor the contact, it realistically should be punished. Overall, the fact that we're able to talk about controversy, overtakes, racing, shows that this weekend at Spa went really well, whether it was the sprint or the Grand Prix. It was definitely some of the most entertaining racing to watch this season. And even to someone who doesn't like the sprint like me, I could genuinely appreciate and see the reason for having it here. We got different conditions with different drivers racing each other, which is what the sprint needs to be. I would like them to be able to take those elements and bring them forward to next season if the sprint format is going to continue. I hope you were able to enjoy Spa as much as I was. Make sure you subscribe if you're an F1 fan, because I'll keep you updated on everything F1, and I'll see you all in the next video. You can also become a channel member, link in the description.